It's a funded project at the University of Ilorin, Kwara State. And then this afternoon we will be discussing about the National Disability Act. And then very soon we'll have our, our Oga, Dr. Azubike, be moderating the sessions where we are having two resource persons who will be taking us through some of these topics today. But before then, we will be taking a welcome address from our learned chief, Dr. J.O. Olatoke, who will be giving his welcome address. Dr. J.O. Olatoke San. At the same time this afternoon also, we will be having the Honorable Special Advisor to the Governor on Civil Society Matters, Ekiti State, who will also be joining us. He will be giving his goodwill message as well. Then the SSA to the Governor on Mrs. Abimbola Solanke will also be joining us. And then she will be giving goodwill message. So I don't know if Dr. J. Olatoke-san.
Yes, Dr. J. Olatoke is ably represented by Professor Mukhtar Etudaye. Professor Mukhtar Etudaye is a professor at the Faculty of Law, University of Ilorin, and a former director of the Center for In-House Research and Training. Professor Etudaye. Professor Etudaye, you have the floor. Hello, Professor Etudaye.
Etudaye, you need to unmute your mic, sir.
Okay, while we wait for Professor Etudaye to reconnect, Funchal just mentioned Professor Etudaye. Professor Etudaye, please, can you hear us? Okay, so while we wait for Professor Etudaye, we have two guest speakers for today. The first speaker that we are going to be having today is Dr. Mrs. Ngozi Chumaume. Dr. Mrs. Ngozi Chumaume is a senior lecturer with the Imo State University and a disability rights expert with core expertise on inclusive education. The other speaker we have is Dr. Uzoma Prince Oparaku. Dr. Uzoma is a research fellow at Professor Etudaye. Can you hear us now? Okay. Dr. Uzoma is a research fellow with NIALS, Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, and she has her core research focus on socioeconomic rights with particular respect to rights to health. So she's going to be bringing so much on the table for us today. We also have a special, Professor Etudaye, can you hear us now? Hello, Professor Etudaye. Hello, Professor Tudaye. Yeah, so we have another special guest in our midst today whom I want to introduce. For sure, we have Honorable Titi Lobe Anifowoshe. Titi Lobe Anifowoshe is the founder of the Eagle Foundation and presently a special advisor with the Minister for Transportation, Senator Gbemisola Saraki. She will be speaking to us at some point during the meeting. If we can hear Professor Tudaye, please can we have the welcome remarks? Okay, so in the absence of that, I also see Dr. Raf Bello joining us, Fadile, I believe, joining us all the way from Houston today. It's a pleasure to have you in our midst. I'm excited that.
Thank you very much, Azubuike.
Yeah, I'm excited we are going to be.
Thank you very much, Azubuike. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We are going to be having a very robust discussion. Welcome. Since we're having technical issues with having Professor Tudaye, may I request Dr. Ngozi Ume to please, in 15 minutes, share your thoughts on the National Disability Act. As we know, the Act is meant to assist everybody in Nigeria in appreciating issues surrounding disability law. And this is an area that all would agree that is yet to be developed. We have several international law treaties, both within and beyond the African continent, meant to protect the rights of persons with disability. And Nigeria, following suit, enacted and domesticated its own National Disability Act. And states have the responsibilities also to bring home this law so that it will be relevant and it will be applicable in the states. What does this hold for persons with disabilities? Is it comprehensive enough to protect the right of persons with disabilities? Do lawyers understand fully the scope and the depth of this particular law? How can it be engaged? These and many more, I am sure, we are going to be having our speakers today unpack for us. Once again, I welcome us all. Sit and enjoy your evening. I want to employ us to allow our bandwidth to be very well efficient. Please, if you are not speaking, I want to encourage you, please mute your mic and mute your videos so that we are all going to be able to enjoy our time. Professor Tudaye, can you talk to us now? Professor Tudaye. In the absence of Professor Tudaye, Dr. Ngozi, please can you have the floor?
Can you hear me?
Please go ahead, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Azo. And good day, everyone. Thank you for your time. Today, like as rightly pointed out, we'll be looking at the National Disability Act and the imperatives of securing equality and human dignity for persons with disabilities in Nigeria. And I'll be focusing on the prescriptive and developmental equality values animating the National Disability Act. One may wish to ask, why do we really need a discussion on disability at the intersection of equality and human? You will agree with me that oftentimes it is difficult to get population-based survey of persons with disability. But available research makes us understand that we have about 27 million Nigerians as persons with disabilities. This is really a huge number, and I believe that they matter. Their happiness also matters. And usually they face a lot of violations and discriminations, the violations of their rights and discriminations. And so, guided by the Sustainable Development Goals of 2016, it is now up to us, I believe. When I say us, I mean the government, businesses, civil society organizations, and the general public to work together to build a better future for everyone, including persons with disabilities. We need to have a protective framework that works. Protective frameworks for persons with disability must start with discussions like we are doing today, and I'm happy about that. It will also involve the engagement of the media, civil societies, as well as self-advocacy on the part of persons with disabilities also. So we must start with consciousness raising, because we cannot change the systems we have in our families, in the community, and even at the national level, if people in the society and government do not understand and respect persons with disabilities. If civil society organizations and media personnel do not understand and respect the rights of persons with disabilities. And the protection, enforcement, and advancement of the rights of persons with disabilities will be very difficult if there is not enough awareness as to what disability means in the first place. Because oftentimes I've noticed that people do not understand the main difference between disability and impairment. So a brief overview is just what I've just provided. We have the outline of our discussion. Now we'll look at conceptualization of disability under the Act. In conceptualizing disability under the Act, in conceptualizing disability under the Act, the Act provides a ringing rejection of equality as sameness. In other words, it observes individual differences. The Disability Act, for information, as a matter of information, was passed in January 2019, and it sought to capture the provisions of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It is also important for us to note that the UNCRPD is an international instrument on the rights of persons with disabilities, and it has been signed and ratified by Nigeria in 2007 precisely. So, by way of analogy, one would say that the definition of disability under the CRPD and what we have, the National Disability Act, is consistent in that the interpretation section of disability is where you find the definition of what disability is. And the disability is described in the Act, or defined rather, to include long-term physical, mental, intellectual, sensory impairment, which in interaction with various barriers. The interaction with various barriers, I should think we should take note of the terms interaction with various barriers. And these barriers may hinder the full and effective participation of persons with disabilities on an equal basis with others. We should also underline on equal basis with others. So what does this conceptualization mean? It means that the Disability Act does not individualize impairment. As such, the Act sees disability through the lens of the social model of disability, which is also synonymous with the human rights dimensions of disability. We are happy and excited that the National Disability Act has come to be. This is a good first step. But suffice it to say that within the disability paradigm, we have various models of conceptualizing disability. We have the medical model or the pity party model, which kind of highlights more of the impairment and sees a person with disability as someone who is physiologically insufficient and thus deserves pity and welfare from other human beings. The social model, on the other hand, considers that it is the social, political, and cultural environment that disables a person with disability. So we need to remove the barriers in society so that the person with disability can thrive on an equal basis. In other words, they must be given more to be able to participate fully in society. We also have the political model approach. Basically talks about the cultural model approach. It looks at a particular and accepted culture of some community of persons with disabilities. For instance, persons with hearing impairment always believe that they have a sign language culture, in as much as they cannot speak, but they can communicate using their hands. So basically, these models have been known to represent different thought patterns of understanding disability in order to give expression to them. Moving forward, having given some insights regarding the conceptualization of disability under the National Disability Act. What are those problems? What are those spotlights that promote hierarchical citizenship for persons with disabilities? While we are happy and excited with the policy direction, but there are still challenges and hurdles to get over. For instance, in Nigeria, I think we have about 10 states that have passed the Disability Act into law. This is not a very good signal in terms of commitment. I understand Anambra, Bauchi, Ekiti, Kano, Para, Kogi, Jigawa, Lagos State as well. And I think Ondo and Plateau, they are part of the states that have been able to enact the Disability Act into law. Again, secondly, another identifiable problem that seems there, usually in Nigeria, there seems to be a consistent gap between laws as opposed to provided in Nigeria and commitment towards implementation. And you would agree with that practices with respect to persons are yet to evince the principles embedded in the Disability Act in terms of the social model of disability. This lack of implementation is brought to the fore when persons with disability require access to social services. Well, it also comes to the fore when you refer to a person with disability as a disabled person or a handicapped person without any possibility of contextualizing why you are using such terms or words in the first place. You also see some of those annoying when persons with disabilities are treated the same as every other person in spite of their difference. When they are devalued by attitudes or behavior of people around them. We also see beliefs or misrepresentations about persons with disability. I could go on and on. So these are the questions, these are the problems. And we then ask the question, how do we as a nation move beyond the Disability Act as posited to a society where those who are differently abled are treated with equality and dignity? How do we ensure that persons with disabilities have their voices heard, considered, and reflected in conduct of affairs across sectors and levels of government in Nigeria? So I think, coming to the imperatives, why must we ensure the realization of equality and human dignity for persons with disability? Specifically, the Disability Act aids us in this direction because it responds to the discrimination and exclusion of persons with disabilities and guarantees them the right to equality and non-discrimination. Before the enactment of the Act, persons with disabilities were grossly misrecognized under our 1999 Constitution as amended. I say this because when you look at Section 34 on human dignity, as well as Section 42 on the right to non-discrimination, you would notice that the Constitution recognizes the right to equality that tends to look at individual situations in the same way, regardless of difference. Being equal before the law resonates with the rendition of formal justice, the Aristotelian type of justice. It assumes equality of status, irrespective of difference. It maintains the same proportion and tries to hold concrete equality in the interpretation and distribution of basic goods and services. And so in a juridical sense, one can say that the National Disability Act transcends the equal treatment or formal equality approach in the Nigerian Constitution to embrace the substantive equality for persons with disabilities. This principally means and resonates with the responsibility of the Nigerian community to provide accommodations based on individual differences. Formal equality, unfortunately, requires persons with disabilities to fit into existing social arrangements before they can claim equality. But substantive equality, unlike formal equality, puts the primary cost of providing accommodations on the society instead of on the individual, and it does not individualize disability. But like the social model, considers the state. It considers that the state needs to adjust existing social essence with disabilities. The barriers that exist
Can you
in
please
society
wrap up in another
must
2
be
minutes?
removed.
Can
Hello?
you please round off in another 2 minutes, please?
Okay. I need to run now.
Yeah.
Under the social model, disability is conceived as coming from the environment. But then in a holistic sense, the full implementation of the Disability Act would promote the social inclusion of persons with disabilities across all sectors and levels of society. We believe that the lives of persons with disabilities matter, and we just have to fall in line in terms of ensuring the full implementation of the rights of persons with disabilities. The obligation to accommodate disability makes it obvious that the Disability Act abhors a one-size-fits-all approach to disability issues. And so I would recommend that realizing inclusive equality for persons with disability means that Nigerian authorities must provide persons with disabilities the support they need to attain full participation. There must be additional human, financial, and physical resources for them to thrive. And I would like to conclude with these words, usually subscribed to by the disability community. We believe that every individual is unique, but there is one thing we all have in common. We all want to be treated with respect and to the best of our unique abilities. We all have families, friends, and communities, and lives that are just as fulfilling. People may be different, but they are not less. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Ome. You would agree with me that Dr. May has raised very interesting questions, and she has ended with a wonderful catchphrase. People may be different, but they all still have abilities. I don't know if Professor Tudaye is able to speak to us now. We've been having technical issues with him. But before we go on to the next speaker, I want us to take note of the very important concepts that Dr. Ome raised. The issues of the scope of disability. She raised the issues of interaction without barriers. How do we ensure that persons with disabilities interact with everybody within the school space without barriers? I see somebody that has come into the chat room and that will also speak to us at some point, Dr. Pascal Chime Owadiegu, a consultant pediatrician from the University of Nigeria Teaching Hospital, Enugu. Dr. Owadiegu is a child specialist, and he was my classmate all the way in secondary school, and he had mobility impairment, but he rose today to become a consultant. He will be encouraging us at some point. So if Dr. Uzo Prince Obaraku is here, please may we have Dr. Uzo take the floor. Dr. Uzo Obaraku. We have the Zoom chat room where you can ask your questions if you need to ask questions, aside the fact that we are going to come to the floor. Dr. Uzo Obaraku, please, you have 15 minutes to share your thoughts.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, DINABI. Thank you, Dr. ZBK, professors here present, all protocols duly observed. I am most grateful to my colleague, Dr. Ngozi, who has touched on a few of my slides, and we have to move directly to the crux of my discussion. That way I wouldn't need to lay that foundation anymore about data, statistics, Nigeria, Lagos, and what have you. My discussion this evening will center mostly on health equity. for persons living with disabilities under the Act. Like my colleague said earlier, before the Act, there are several agitations about why we need the Act passed, both at the national level and at the state level. And 30 months after the Act has been passed, and in fact, Lagos passed the Act about 9 years ago, almost a decade ago. The issues we are facing, we are still facing those issues. What are we not doing right? What do we need to do? How do we bring to bear the difference that these laws were made to bring? How do we actualize? How do we operationalize these gains supposedly that were made when these laws were passed?
Family house.
And in order to do that, I will want to talk about the National Act and the Lagos Act. Why am I choosing to talk about the Lagos Act? If you compare the Lagos State Special Persons Law, it is almost pari material with the National Act. And we've seen in many of our laws that is either the nation copies a law abroad and try to adapt it to our special situation, and then the state copies exactly, or vice versa. And in this case, I want to believe that the National Act, they looked very closely at the Lagos law. So I'm going to be looking at what differences there are and how that has played out in impacting health equity for persons living with disability in Nigeria. I want to do without my video. It's affecting the quality of my presentation. Let me put this video off for a minute and see if that helps.
Hello? Hello, Dr. Uzo?
Yes, hello.
Okay.
Yes, I'm here. In looking at the Act, I want to reiterate that a few states have has domesticated the Act. And particularly Lagos. And in that sense, comparing the two, the National Act and the State Act, the state law for Lagos, what differences do we see that has impacted the rights of persons living with disabilities? How their interaction with their basic environment, with enjoying the basic rights we have, the fundamental rights provided under the Constitution, that these laws were brought into place to increase their enjoyment of already existing rights. The National Act in section 3 to 8 details rights of persons living with disabilities to access to public buildings, accessibility aids like ramps, lifts, elevators in public buildings, roads, sidewalks, special facilities like hearing aids, accessibility to public transportation, both those run by the public funds and those run by the private. In section 6 of the National Act, it gives 5 years as the time frame within which buildings already in existence needs to transition to being accessible to persons living with disability. And then going forward, building plans will need to reflect accessibility for persons living with disability. Under Part 5, Section 21, Sub 1, it guarantees unfettered access to adequate healthcare for persons living with disabilities in Nigeria. It's a national law, of course, that needs to be domesticated. And without domestication, many of Nigerian citizens will not enjoy the benefits of this law, except they are given healthcare or healthcare services under federal health facilities. And by unfettered access, what exactly is the law trying to say? Unfettered, is it by way of accessibility, um, uh, in the sense of there are ramps through which those coming with wheelchairs are able to come in? Is it that by the time they get to the hospital, there are hearing aids, there are interpreters who are there to assist them, are there social workers who are there to help, persons with depression who walk into these facilities? And in section 21 sub 2, it guarantees free mental medical care. For some reason, the National Act chose to guarantee specifically mental care. Maybe because it's been difficult for the country to update our Lunacy Act of 1958 that has gone through there have been several attempts to reform that law, and it hasn't quite been fruitful up to date. Maybe that's what it's trying to do. And then again, we wonder, can the nation afford free medical care for persons living with disabilities in the nation that we are told are between 25 million to 27 million? I don't know that Nigeria can afford that. So it seems to be a crafty and a convenient way to avoid providing medical care for persons living with disabilities in Nigeria, to say unfettered access in section 24 sub 1 and go ahead to give free mental services to persons living with disabilities. It means that it's only persons with mental disability, that's the only person, or intellectual disability, emotional, people who have, psychological problems, that the Act is providing free medical health for. Then in section 23, it provides that it's an offense to issue or obtain certificate of disability by fraud. And you begin to wonder, why are we on a hurry to criminalize issuing and obtaining? And we went as far as providing for imprisonment for a demographic we are trying to integrate into the society, to put them on the same pedestal with citizens who are not living with disabilities. So these are, some provisions in the law that you look at, you wonder, are these aiding health equity, or are they impeding health equity? When I get to my recommendations, I will review that again to offer my my thoughts on reform. Section 24, section 25 provides for inclusion of persons living with disabilities in emergency planning, and this is a topical issue even as we speak, because we're still in COVID-19 easing of lockdown phases. We are either in the third phase where people have gone back to work. And when we say people have gone back to work, these are people who are able-bodied, who had a job anyway before there was a lockdown. Our persons with disability mostly operate in the informal sector, where their businesses are mostly in person. And even though we have this provision, the pandemic responses were planned and executed without much recourse to the plight of the disabled in our society. Therefore, palliatives were given out without, relying on any, reasonable or reliable data of disabled people who PWs, provided that they will remove any fixtures that they add to the buildings when they are leaving. And you begin to wonder, what exactly is this law trying to say? That if I am disabled and I want to rent an apartment in Lagos or in Abuja, and I need a ramp, I will have to build the ramp myself. And when I'm leaving, I will have to dismantle the ramp. Does this really help a person living with disability? I do not think so. It would have made sense, it would have been more beneficial to the person living with disability if this law provided that in building places that will be offered to the public, even if it's not built by the government, even if it's owned by the private, that you make accommodation for a person living with disability. That way they are not discriminated against in getting a home around the country. They are not limited in the property available for them to rent or lease. In section 37, under the powers of the commission, sub J empowers the commission to establish schools for the deaf and the blind, collaborate with MGAs for inclusive planning in policy making and programs and issue in Sydney. And I want to talk about particularly about establishing schools. Before the act, we already had schools for the blind in Yaba, in other parts of the country. I will expect that if we are passing a law in 2018, that we will integrate the children into the regular schools, make provision for these children to attend, like Queen's College Yaba, make provision for them to, school with their friends, with, have friends that are not necessarily, in their same situation. That way they interact like everyone else. Their barriers to be regular members of the society will be reduced. However, providing special schools alone further puts them on a, makes them other. It makes them the other group. They are school in different schools because of their situation. And that's exactly what the law was trying to avoid in the first place. And I want to make a comparison with the Lagos law. Like I said earlier, this law was passed in 2011, right after Nigeria ratified the CRPD. It's older than the National Act, and because it's older, I believe that the country must have looked at it while the national law was being passed. In section 7, in section 3, sub 7, I find the law very interesting because it's very big on data. And that's one thing that Nigeria is having a very huge challenge with. That's why we are having problem with the US issuing us immigrant visas. That's why the country is moving ahead with a single digital identity for Nigerians. If we have reliable data, it would have been easy to assess PWDs during palliative sharing. Welfare distribution at our welfare register would be a lot more robust and efficient and useful in times in emergency, in health emergency preparedness planning. However, we don't have that. But this law in Lagos makes provision for collection and collation of data on PWs to ensure efficient planning and inclusivity for PWs. The same section 3, sub 15, enjoins the Lagos State body for PWs to keep and update a register and database for PWs in the state. This is very, very progressive, very important. It will be useful for the country to look at that and make sure not just to have a database for PWs, we can even endorse the single digital identity that the country is trying to implement, endorse the idea of people living with permanent disabilities with their disability status. That's why they do not, that way they did not even need to obtain a certificate or to carry about their certificate of disability. That way when they present their ID, which is the national identity number, the information on their disability is already accessible to the hospitals. Of course, this also begs the question on sharing of data between private agencies and public agencies, between inter-agency sharing of data. That begs the question, and we hope that we'll get it right in the future. Section 28 sub 2A joins levels of government in Lagos State. That will be the state government and the local government to ensure that PWs have adequate housing, food, clothing, and continuous improvement in living conditions. For the kind of funding we have in the country, is very interesting how Lagos is able to do this, and it's obvious that we can't afford some of these elegant provisions. We copy and paste and hope that it will assuage the agitations of groups that are asking for this rights, these laws to be passed. And once it's passed, that's okay. We throw them that that bone, and they can go through it all they want. But anyway, we still need the law, because if we have a law, we're able to, they are actionable. We're able to, take the government to court and see what we're able to get out of them. Section 28 sub 3 enjoins employers, government organizations, schools to reserve 5% accommodation for PW. This is very progressive. However, it would have been good if this law also provided for employers to reserve 5% of employment, both for MDAs, banks, what have you, the organized private sector, to reserve 5% of their employment quota for PWs. That way we lift them out of poverty. We reduce how many PWs are living in poverty and are able to access. That improves their right to enjoy, their ability to enjoy the rights already provided under our ground, which is the Constitution. Section 31.7 of the LSSPL, which is the Lagos Law, sub 10, provides that government, sub 7, sorry, that a child born with disability will be registered at birth. Again, this presupposes that we are able to share data with hospitals. That way, when a child goes to the hospital, we are able to access this information and able to treat the child for free. As you know, every state that has passed the disability law gave right to free medical care for persons living with disability. And this is very progressive. The national law can do with this kind of provision. Again, we can endorse our national IDs with these things. That way, especially when they're permanent, when a child is born, that way we're able to get that out of the way right from the start. Section 10, sub 10 of section 31 of the Lagos Law provides that government will fund alternative care for persons living with disabilities where the family is unable to afford the care. I don't know that Lagos has the infrastructure to get this done. In other countries like the US, when the law provides for alternative care, these things can be accessed through the social welfare register. That way the state is able to send help to the home because the relatives of the disabled person is able to work their work, so that way they're not able to care for their disabled relatives. So I want to finally, I know my time is almost gone. I want to finally hinge on health funding in Nigeria and health equity for PWDs. Nigeria in 2018 spent 3.6% of its national budget on health. In 2019, it was 4.75%. And in 2020, of course, with all what has gone on in the country's funding, we've had to review our budget a few times to come up with our final data, and we have 4.14, which is a little less than what we have last year on health. I mean, so obviously this is not able to provide for any reasonable access to health services, even for the able-bodied. So how will the disabled access health when we are not even able to provide the funding for regular health? There's no way this law is operable without an increase in funding for health. And Lagos State is doing a little better, but still, it doesn't reduce the issues that we face today. Lagos State spends 7.8% of its annual budget on health in 2018. This is far below 15%, which is minimum standard aspiration for developing nations. And we hope that even if we don't go to 15, we can, gradually and consistently progress towards increasing access to medical services for Nigerians, and particularly for persons living with disabilities. There's a story that that I find very interesting regarding access to health for persons living with disabilities. A person that has albinism approached a hospital in Yaba asking for help with surgery, and she was telling the hospital that she's a person living with disability. She has a certificate and she's entitled to free medical care. And in all honesty, the staff told her that we don't have an arrangement for how to fund your medical care. You will have to pay for your health care. And that's the reality on ground. It's just a collection of elegant provisions without a deliberate attempt to create systems, programs that will pay for the medical health of persons living with. Somebody has to pay for health. There's no other way to get it done other than to pay for it. And my take on that, my suggestion for ameliorating this, this mishap for persons living with disability is to implement. Let's start from what we already have, the NHIS Act. Let's implement it as it is and incorporate PWs as we go along. Let's make what we have operable first before we start, copying elegant provisions from abroad just to assuage, people who agitate for this. Universal health coverage remains the ultimate answer to an equitable access to health for both regular individuals in the country, in the nation, and persons living with disabilities. It's the only way to increase access to curative and preventive health for persons living with disabilities. And let me run towards the end of my presentation. I know that Dr. Azubike will soon ask me to stop. And imperative, what do we do? Where do we go from here? We have been told, what the theories are, how we got here, how, the laws have been passed, what they are supposed to achieve, but they have not achieved it. What do we need to do? Section 8 provides for a right to complain about inaccessibility. I know that our system is slow, our system is difficult to navigate, but we need to confront it. We need to make effort. If you are a PW who you're able to talk, you're able to engage with the system. When you get to a building and it's not PWD accessible, make a complaint. And if after a while they've not given you any response, approach a CSO, CLO, any organization. Let it be taken up by that organization. There are lawyers who do pro bono work that these CSOs and CLOs, faith-based organizations, we know that we may be able to pick up these cases and go to court with these matters. That way, we're able to get as many buildings as possible accessible to PW. Section 22 provides for certificate of disability that a doctor with a permission from the commission, approval. How does that work? Why include a provision like that in that law? You clog the wheel of the implementation by putting in an approval. A doctor that is properly registered under our law should be qualified enough to issue a disability certificate. It can be questioned thereafter, but for the disabled person to continue their life, to have a better interaction with the environment and the society as soon as they leave the hospital, they need that approval. They need the certificate given immediately. It can be questioned later if it was issued in mala fide or in error. It can be questioned later in a court of law or by judicial review. However, but it is not helpful that medical doctor will have to get an approval from the commission to issue a certificate of disability. And the law doesn't say what kind of doctor. Is he a medical doctor? Is he an alternative medicine doctor? What kind of doctor are we talking about? Again, I talked about the imprisonment issue. We need to reduce our recourse to custodial sentencing. Even post COVID-19, we don't need to send more people to prison. We need to integrate them in society. We need to give sentences that are more transformative than custodial. Section 24 provides for accommodations for special communication in public hospitals. Of course, we don't have that in a lot of our hospitals in Nigeria. And it shouldn't just be public hospitals. Not so many people engage the public. I don't think I've been treated by a public hospital before, and most people have not. So when we're making these laws, we need to be country specific, be specific to our situation. Even any hospital offering services to the public should make provision for special communication for persons living with disability, unless you're going to consume those services yourself. If you are rendering that service to the Nigerian public, you should be able to make a provision for special communication. In section 29, instead of specialized schools, I already spoke about that. Of course, the elephant in the room is more states should more states should adopt the act, domesticate the act. However, we don't have many states who have. Those who have, we're not reaping so many benefits. However, passing the law is an important base, is an important foundation for these rights, even though they don't seem to be working. But at least we need to have these laws passed at the state level as a way to increase, the health equity for persons living with disability. And finally, hashtag take responsibility. Beyond what the state can do for us, beyond what public funds can afford for us, we must reach higher. We must make so there's no sign interpreter and your relative needs a sign interpreter, go ahead and ask for it and let them say they don't have. If we keep asking for it, maybe one of these days they will provide one. Or if we walk away because they don't have it and go to where they do, maybe they will sit up. If there are no hearing aids in your church, talk to your pastor. Can they have a Braille Bible that people that are blind can read if they went to school for the blind? We can make requests in our church when we are building our churches. Let's make provision for ramps to enter our churches as private individuals. Let's make at our children's schools, in our offices. Let's push for these reforms. I don't think that the state can get to everybody as soon as we want them to. Let's make effort to test the limits of these provisions by requesting, demanding for compliance from all the authorities who are in a position to provide us with those rights. Property owners, if you own a building, build a ramp. Don't wait for government don't wait for the government to come to push you to build a ramp. Make sure that there is an apartment on the ground floor where a person living with a disability can move in and move out, or without needing to remove anything. We can go beyond the law. We can add value to what the law has already provided. Business owners, if you run a business, if you know someone who have a friend who run a business, suggest to them to make assistance to PWs part of their corporate social responsibility. A case in point is in MTN. MTN Foundation has done a lot for persons living with disabilities in Nigeria, and I know that there are probably other companies who are doing the same. And if we keep talking about it, if we keep pushing for this advocacy by action, let's do something, say something, push, test the limits of these provisions in our area of influence. And disabled relatives, I have a relative who didn't go to school at all. She has Down syndrome, and as we grew up together. And looking back now, I wonder why wasn't she sent to school? Just because she was disabled? Because we don't know. We have it's inconvenient to showcase the disability of our relative. But if you have a cousin, a brother, a sister, an in-law who has a disabled child, push for the child to be sent, for the family to find help. I'm sure there are help, even if it's not from the mainstream provision of services. There are companies, there are organizations offering training and skills acquisition for persons living with disabilities. And if we keep testing these limits this way, we will increase the access of persons living with disability to education, to health, to transportation, safe and comfortable housing, and what have you. Thank you. Hello, I'm done. Hello, thank you. Was anybody hearing me at all?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Yes, we heard you.
Loud and clear.
We are hearing you.
I'm asking. Azubike, please.
Other more for the presentation.
Dr. Azubike, please unmute your mic. Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm done.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Uzo, for that wonderful presentation. Uzo spoke so much. She highlighted the challenges of persons with disability in an emergency climate. She talked about inclusive education. she talked about the need for us not to treat persons with disability as the other group. She talked about quality, universality, and coverage, and she talked about taking responsibility. While she was speaking, a senior member of the Disability Law Advocacy Project came into the room, Professor Wahab Ebewole, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. We welcome you. I'm sure at some point you would have the floor to speak and respond to the questions also raised about initiating public interest litigation. And I think this is what we need to do in Nigeria to test the jurisprudence concerning persons with disability. So before I call on other people to make inputs in the conversation, I want to revert to Professor Mukhtar Etudaye. Mukhtar Etudaye is representing Dr. J.O. Olatoke, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, who is the head project for the Disability Advocacy Project. Professor Etudaye, please, can you speak to us now if you can hear us? Professor Etudaye, please. Okay, while we are still trying to sort out Professor Etudaye, at the beginning we had the special assistant to the Minister for State for Transportation, Honorable Titi Lobe, if she's here, would want you to react to some of the issues that have been raised by the presenters. Titi, can you hear me still?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so one of the issues that resonates through the presentations, it's government. I know you're not speaking officially in any capacity for the government now, but talking about the transportation sector, reasonable accommodation, do you want to say anything in that wise for about 2 minutes, please?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be here. Of course, I'm your student, and some of my lecturers are here, so it's a very huge privilege that I am sharing the same stage with you all. I'm very happy to be here. I'd just like to say that as of today, the area of road transportation and mass transit is quite green, and thankfully, my principal, the Honorable Minister of State for Transportation, is actually very interested in road transportation. And as you know, we are just starting, but I must say that we are going to, before the end of those 4 years, actually work to address such issues as people living with disability. Of course, you should know that she's a very passionate person, passionate about gender, passionate about persons living with disability, passionate about the youth, and I am very, very sure that this is going to be a focal point. And be sure that I, as a participant in this webinar, am going to actually kickstart conversation about giving allocations and giving recognition for people living with disability. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for that wonderful input. So I think if one of the outputs we take from here is that the transportation industry is now going to come to the point of having special provision with disability for access to transport. Talking about litigation as raised by Dr. Barako, when persons living with disabilities go to hospitals and they are turned down, they are not able to access health facilities. The health budget, as she has raised, is grossly represented. Professor Wahab Ebewole, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, how can this be achievable in Nigeria?
Sorry, I didn't hear the initial part of the question.
Yes.
Hello?
The presentation by Dr. Barako, she raised a fundamental issue, and that is the need for us to engage with Nigerian law by way of testing these laws in courts. Health facilities are not convenient. What can we do in terms of litigation? We know that litigation is not a cheap thing. What can be done? Are we getting ready to begin to test the provisions of the law. And I look at the chat room, I see a particular question that also deals, can we really engage the government on issues of persons with disability? A whole lot of lawyers and a whole lot of people believe on the non-justiciable doctrine. How is it going to be achievable, if at all it can be?
Thank you so very much. Let me also join others in congratulating the organizers of this great forum to bring up ideas on how to move the challenges that people living with abilities are facing. Let me also congratulate and commend the presenter, Ngozi. Unfortunately, I missed your part of the presentation. Uzo, I also missed a substantial part, but I can see the passion that have been put into it. And Ngozi is smiling now, means that she must have also done justice to the topic. Now, the issue of access to court, whether for able or disabled people, is a constitutional issue. And for me, Section 66B did not discriminate on who can access the court. And if, because of one's physical constitution, one cannot access the court, I believe is an issue that could be pushed. And of course, for me, that cannot be confined or circumscribed into the non-justiciability provision of Chapter 2. Because if the drafters of the Constitution in their wisdom provides for settlement of all forms of disputes, and I think the jurisprudence is gradually developing that access to court, the justiciability question, will take over and override all other issues as it's happening in other places, South Africa, India. At least those ones are closer to us. For me, I believe it is our duty, one, as academics, two, as lawyers, to take on the gauntlet of public interest litigation. And as the presenter said, we will be shooting ourselves in the leg if we are not taking, because no pain, no gain. For as long as we do not see it as a fundamental issue to pursue. And gradually, I recall that at the level of electoral law, before Amechi's case, Aralume decided that if a party decides that I'm not going to free somebody, I'm going to free him or her, there's nothing anybody can do about it. By the time Amechi's case came on board, it was clear to the Supreme Court that if the court can be treated with indignity and impunity by saying, well, even if you say Ararume is the winner of the primaries, as far as we are concerned, we will not present a candidate at that election. And that was what happened. And that was why Ararume could not even contest the election, in spite of the fact that Supreme Court ruled that he was the candidate of PDP then. Now, by the time they were determining Amechi, Amechi did not ask for him to be returned. But because of the policy decision that the Supreme Court needed to do, the decision was taken. And that has now culminated into the Section 87(9) of the Electoral Act as we have it today. The point I'm making essentially is that we may not succeed initially, but whether we like it or not, if we push very well, we will end up. So I endorse the submission of the presenter that there is need for public interest litigation on issues that we think are trivial. The major challenge has always been the time that decisions are taken. as well as the financial implication. So I think for us, for instance, DLAP, for instance, DINABI, and such other bodies, and could take up the challenge of pushing the issues to court. Even if you know that before now, the issue of local standard was far more stringent until late Chief Ganifa Emi started pushing. And by the time and FGN was decided, with respect to whether a public official, a Nigerian public official, can be paid in foreign currency. The argument of the federal government initially was no, Ganifa Emi had no local standard. But today we know that the issue of local standard is now far more enlarged than what we used to have. So for me, I think it is important for us as academics, it's important for us as advocates of disability rights to start pursuing the goal. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Professor Wahabewewole ACN, for that interesting intervention. So, Funsho, do we have the SA to the Ekiti State Governor here with us now? Hello, Funsho. Okay, so I'll go to the next. If you have a question from the audience and you want to speak, please may you use the hand raising option on your screen so that we recognize you and we can unmute you to make your intervention. We are not really able to, okay, so I see Modestus Ekenze, please, you have the floor. Just ask your question or make your intervention, please.
I will send it out to you. I will let you know if I receive it. I have not received it.
Okay, thank you very much for that opportunity. Very nice presentations from the first speaker and the second. My question basically borders on the conceptualization we've given disability, especially in our circles. There seem to be this absence.
Modestus, before you continue, are you addressing any of the speakers specifically, or you just?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm addressing specifically Dr. Ngozi Chuma-Ume.
Okay.
Our conception of disability, especially as she has pronounced and expressed, is very interesting. But I wish to state that there's an aspect to which we have not covered. There seems to be this quietness about exactly how religion plays a part in our understanding and our interpretation of disability. This is Africa and this is Nigeria, a nation with so much concentration on religion and values that accrue from them. Our interpretation and notion of ability directly transfers to disability. How does this tally into the conception we already have? And how can we mitigate the challenges PWDs experience in the circles using that interpretation?
Thank you, Modesta. So I will take 4 questions and then we'll take responses and we'll proceed. Galazi S10, please, can we hear you?
Thank you very much. My name is Aishatu Abdullahi, a disability advocate from Sokoto State. I actually have a contribution and a question that I would like to put through to the 2 presenters. My contribution is when we talk about inculcating persons with disability into the society. And for me, I see there is no better way to it than inclusive education. Because when we critically look at disability issues, we tend to see that in most cases, it starts from the home, from the parent itself. And there I see our kids and children playing a vital role by having an inclusive education. Because where we have a system where the visually impaired, the hearing impaired, and all how vital the children, vital role they play in also shaping, in most cases, the ideas of the parents. So that will go a long way in addressing the barriers they start facing from home. My question now goes that we have webinars, we have seminars, we have programs that are really targeted at persons with disability. And in Nigeria, from the statistics we have, we learned that it's already about 27 million. We already have about 27 million persons with disability. But when we critically look at it, they are basically based in the rural areas who have little or no access to all these informations that are being passed through. So how best, because irrespective of the fact that there are advocates that advocate for their issue, but still it boils down to there is nothing about us without us. So how best do we bring these people to an understanding? Now we have the Disability Act, the National Disability Act, we have some states domesticating it. And I'm happy to say in my state, also Sokoto State, today the act has had its second reading and it has been passed to the committee, which I hope in the next 1.5 months, it should be probably signed into law. But this is something that has been done for category of people who are not even aware and don't even have a good understanding on how to pursue this issue. So how best is a way of going through
that
about
question.
this? Yes.
I think we've noted it on the how best. Kola Ogunbiyi, please. Kola Ogunbiyi.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My name is Kola Ogunbiyi. I want to appreciate the resource persons for their presentation. I'd like to appreciate my professor, Professor Bewale, who happens to be my international law lecturer while I was a student there. My question, not a question anyway, it's a contribution. While the presenter were looking at inclusion, I was thinking that they will provide in practical terms, what we can do to have inclusive education in our system, because it's very important. Although we have it in the law, but if you don't take action to put it into use, there is no way we can have it activated. So what, in practical terms, what can we do to activate inclusive education? Also, I want to draw our attention to, because while she was making her presentation, she referred to states that have domesticated the law. I want to point out that some of these states actually had their law, state law, before the National Disability Act. I think it's just Kogi State that has its law after the signing of Disability Act. Then, as an organization, because I work with a disability organization, I also want to join my voice with litigation advocacy, which Prof mentioned about, which already we are doing in my organization. We are trying to see how we can litigate, because if you look at Section 14 of the Act, it provides that airplane and all that should be made accessible to persons with disability. But we discovered that persons with disability faces a lot of challenges when they want to board and when they are deboarding. So it's a critical issue that we have taken upon ourselves. As a matter of fact, we have prepared our processes that want to file in court to challenge that, to challenge the implementation of that section of the law. So which I think other organizations should also buy into and begin to do so.
Thank you, Kola. So let me revert to Dr. Ume. Yeah, you've heard some of the questions that are directed at you. And I think what resonates in these questions, it's about practicability. What are your thoughts in 2 minutes? Then we'll go to Uzo for her own thoughts so that we can take more questions. Thank you. You have to unmute.
Better now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the questions coming from Modestos and from our colleague in Sokoto State. Talking about inclusive education, yes, I agree with them. It's very, very vital for inclusion of persons with disabilities. But it's quite unfortunate that some within Nigeria's curriculum, or in terms of the curriculum for education, most of the education practitioners do not really appreciate what we mean when we talk about inclusive education. Inclusive education does not necessarily mean putting persons with disabilities or placing them in special schools. We cannot deny that maybe in literally it could mean that, but that is not the real meaning of inclusive education within this UNCRPD and the National Disability Act. Inclusive education starts from the home. If we must realize inclusive education for persons with disabilities, it must start from the home, from the parents, and then from the parents to the school. And we have to start with early child education, teaching a child in the language of his or her environment. If the language is Igbo, start with Igbo. If it is Hausa, start with Hausa. If it is Yoruba, start with Yoruba. And it has to be individualized learning in terms of providing the needed accommodation. That brings us to the approach. We have to use the right approach. For instance, when you are teaching hearing persons with hearing impairments, for example, some of them use total communication, where they use both language and they also use hearing aids. There are also some persons with hearing impairments who do not acknowledge the use of hearing aids. They prefer to use the sign language. So the important thing is to identify these differences and then teach the educators, teach the people, the practitioners, the stakeholders in education that this is what has to be done and needs to be done if we must realize inclusive education for persons with disability. Because it is only when they are informed, when they understand what the situation is, then they can now begin to self-advocate, to say, no, we don't want to be addressed this way. No, we demand that you provide these accommodations for us. And I've often quarreled with that term, reasonable accommodation, because I see it as a way of evading responsibilities from those who wield authority in the states. Because when you talk about reasonable accommodation, they can tell you that it is not reasonable because they do not have the resources. The resources are there if we show commitment. And this commitment must start from the family, through the community, and then the state and at the national level. Coming to the second question about religion, it all boils down to equality and the idea of the social model. In other words, we are not saying that this impairment does not exist. It exists, but then what kind of accommodation does this individual require? If you are in church, for instance, and the priest talking, it is through awareness, conscious raising, like I said earlier, that we begin to educate, enlighten them on what needs to be done so that our brothers, persons with disabilities, can access information and appreciate what is being done. I think.
Thank you, Dr. Ome. So I would revert to Dr. Uzo to respond to those questions. And after Dr. Uzo, I don't know if we have a Reverend Father with us, Reverend Father Roland Nwosu. I would want you, after the next speaker, to tell us a bit on the questions of disabilities and religion from a practitioner's perspective. Dr. Uzo, please.
Thank you for your questions, Ms. Titi and Mr. Kola. Ms. Titi asked a question about how we reach PWDs who are in rural areas. My answer to that will be the model we used for immunization. I know that is very, very cost intensive, but is a model that could work with reaching parents in the rural areas. Dr. Ngozi mentioned that inclusive education starts in the home, but a parent needs to know enough to implement it. They may not even know what inclusive education means. So if we need to spend time and deliberately create programs that educate illiterate parents in rural Eastern Nigeria, Northern Nigeria, Western Nigeria, in the hinterlands where even parents themselves are not educated. But of course, we want to have the next generation who are educated, whether they are living with disabilities or not. So that model where we have, as a growing child in Eastern Nigeria, I know that immunization officers were always in our churches. Until I grew up, they were always there. And I think they are no longer there so much. Then it was funded by USAID, expanded program on immunization, because before Nigeria took over the funding and continued with the program. But we need to, as a nation and states, in conjunction with the federal government, implement a program that we can send advocates into the churches and mosque, faith-based organization is where we easily find a cluster of children and their parents, especially women who care for children in our society that is very, very patriarchal. Is the women that stay with the children, and when the child is not in school, they stay with their mother. So more often than not, if we can implement that model to reach the parent, that way they know in the first place what inclusive education is, what they need to do to prepare the child for the other arm of inclusive education that they will meet when they get to school. That's believing and hoping, aspiring that we will implement inclusive education in our schools. And inclusive education for me, in schools itself, I would prefer where we have inclusive education for PWDs within our schools. They may not necessarily be in the same class, because I don't see how you teach mathematics to a child that cannot see with children that can see, or a child that cannot hear with children that can hear. But within the same building, that way the child, when people are going to school, the child knows that they're going to the same location. And the child who can see sees the child that cannot see. They know that, they understand their challenges. They see how they interact with the environment. That way, growing up, so that in the next few years, the next 20 years, we have young people, we have 40-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 20, who understand disabilities enough to activate system, to create institutions that will survive successive administrations in creating programs for the disabled. That way, we don't have abandoned, programs that provide for inclusive education. And then Mr. Kola asked a question about how do we activate? Yeah, I guess I already answered that. Inclusive. First of all, we need to reach the parents in the village by sending out advocates, government-based advocates. I don't think that CLOs can do this. It has to be a countrywide program that will arrest that lack of knowledge, that lack of understanding. Like I said, I have cousins who have Down syndrome. They were not sent to school like us. They were just left at home. They grew up to become help for the family, and it's understood, it's accepted, it's okay. They don't even marry. Why? There are people I've seen, of course, online where people that have Down syndrome, they got married to other people that have Down syndrome, but they made them in school. They made them outside the home. But when we keep them at home and we don't give them opportunity to interact with the system, they may not meet people like them who may like them. Or even I have someone in my church when I was living outside Nigeria who she's not blind, but she's married to a blind person. And they're in love. It's exciting. And they come to church. The church, of course, is wheelchair enabled and all, but that's abroad. But here, if we create opportunity for disabled children to interact with the regular system, not with the school of the blind in Yaba or the school of the deaf or wherever it is, that within Queen's College, there is a social worker, there is a counselor, there is a teacher who teach the children who are deaf. There's a mathematics teacher who teach children who cannot see. That way, they graduate with the same certificate, but they are taught the same thing, but through different mechanisms.
Thank you, Dr. Ozo, for that wonderful intervention. Really, I think it is important that we also now begin to have that understanding that there is nothing to be ashamed about having one form of disability or the other. Okay. We need to encourage, we need to educate. So, Reverend Father Roland Nwosu, I had wanted you to respond to also Modesto's concern on disability and religion. As a Catholic priest, what is the challenge that you find with issues of disability and religion? In most of our churches today, we've turned churches and religious centers into miracle centers. People don't want to accept that they have disabilities because they want miracles. They want their ears to be opened. They want to throw away their crutches. What would you respond in this wise?
Good afternoon, all, and I want organizers of the program, and I also want to thank you, Dr. Azu, for giving me this opportunity. Taking up from your last submission with regards to what we find in churches, I wouldn't want to use some of those situations of abnormalities as a standard. Disability is something that is there and is there with us. In one way or the other, I fall under a category of it, albinism. I live with albinism. And I want to thank the presenters. I mean, those who have talked about negating the idea of the other class. That is some kind of integration. If I start telling my story here, I mean, the time will elapse. But as a matter of fact, I am a product of that. I didn't have a background that discriminated. As a matter of fact, I remember growing up, I never knew I had eyes problem. It was when my dad was teaching that he got to know that I couldn't see well. In my primary school, I go to the board, I write, I come back to my seat. So some of all those, I grew up with them, and to God be the glory, albinism was never a hindrance in any way for me. About coming to the issue of religion and what to find in the church, yeah, the church that I belong to, let me use that word, the Catholic Church, recognizes disability as a reality, and there are various institutions of the church that specialize on taking care of people who live with disability. There are so many congregations, reverend sisters, who run homes for people like that. So the church devote time, devote resources, devote some kind of even training for some of those persons who pay attention to them. Then coming also to the church where I work, we try to make provisions for people who have, for instance, vision impairment. We try to provide projectors to project the readings when the readings are on, so that they will be able to follow. We also try to get interpreters, sign interpreters. We have them here. I mean, students who come here to study, who are Catholics, who happen to be Catholics, and perhaps they cannot really hear, they cannot even hear. They have interpreters who help them. When we preach, when we do things in church, they carry them along. And after the service, you see them come around to thank you, to greet you, and all that. So the church recognizes that and tries in her own limited way, let me use that word, to carry them along. And to a great extent, one of the things the church will also promote is the issue of equal representation with regards to that. The church in any way will not want to marginalize.
I know, sorry, I'm cutting you short, but because we need to let other people speak too.
Sorry.
So Titi Lobe, I want to get back again quickly to you before I take another round of questions. Some of the questions that have been commented, it's about us taking responsibility. And I know, aside your capacity as an aid to the ministry, you also work on disability issues. Presently, I know about the Pad Up initiative that you're doing right now. How do you think we can take responsibility, both as individuals and also in our official capacities, maybe working in government?
Thank you very much, sir. like Professor Egbewale said earlier, advocacy, sometimes we, like Eli Clinton was said, we have to keep trying to push until we break the glass ceiling. People who are public servants, people who are government officials are humans like us. And like I learned in school, like you taught me, customs, our general acceptance, they are all sources of law. And so our practices, our actions, and inaction, somehow, some way, finds their way into becoming norms, into becoming laws. So I feel like personally, this program is quite a coincidence, because I am only just learning so much about persons living with disability, because I work with an NGO, and right now my NGO is currently trying to raise 500,000 naira to buy 100 braille frames to help blind students to enhance their education. Now, until when we thought about engaging and executing this project was when I was able to read more about the situations and how people living with disability are able to cope in our society. So personally, I feel that we need to keep on eating the polity. We need to keep on talking about it at every fora, at every opportunity we have. We need to call on our representative. We need to call on our family and friends to actually understand that people living with disability have as much right as we do, and then it is incumbent on each and every one of us to actually do things and talk about things that will enhance their living. So for me, the whole system in the society has changed. The social media is now a very, very important factor and agent for social change, So aside talking about it at webinars like this, where we have so many distinguished personalities and luminaries, we can actually make it a normal conversation for every common person, you and I, in the buses, on radio, on television. We shouldn't just wait for those days when UN makes special for people living with disability before we actually talk about it. As in, I feel so bad that I don't even know whether or not Kwara State has domesticated disability act. And really, I sent a DM to Dr. Azubike that if Kwara State haven't, I think I am going to actually find a way to ensure that they actually domesticate this law in Kwara State. So from this moment henceforth, I promise to be an advocate of persons living with disability. Thank you very much, Dr. Azubike, for giving me this opportunity to actually learn from these great women and men. Thank you very, very much. I really learned a lot, and I am promising that beyond this webinar, I am actually going to be an agent of social change. And I'm also calling on my fathers and mothers, I'm calling on my lecturers to actually, you can support Eagles Foundation for Humanity with what we're doing. We're working with blind students in Pasali School for the Blind in Surulere. We're trying to raise funds to get them braille frames. And inshallah, this won't stop here. This will stop here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Titi Lobe, for making that. I'm sure this project, the DINABI project and the Disability Law Advocacy Project at the Jurisprudence and International Law Department of the University of Ilorin. DLAP has funding from the Open Society Initiative for West Africa to populate knowledge about disability rights in the country. And I'm sure that we are taking a positive, because we know that the feedback from this is going to be getting to the Minister for State for Transportation, that persons with disability are making some strong advocacy and agitation. So Funsho, I must say that DINABI putting this program together, we have really made an achievement. Next, I want to call on, I saw some people, their hands have been up for a while. Abacha Ijebo, the Techno Spark 4, and Barakat Raji. Please, in 1 minute, can you ask your questions?
Good afternoon. I am Abasha from Ijebu-Ode. I'm working with Justice Development and Peace Commission. My question goes thus. During Jonathan and Obasanjo period, the National Assembly passed the bill for the people living with disability, but it was not signed by Obasanjo and Jonathan. Same in Ogun State. In 2000, Ogun State House of Assembly in August passed the bill of people living with disability, which we have been fighting for since 1999, and the governor did not sign it. My question goes thus that, why is it that the National Assembly and the State Assembly did not use their veto power to sign it into law after 3 months? And my second question goes like this. President Buhari told law in 2018, but since then, the to get implemented. What can we do so that we can get it implemented? Thank you very much.
Hello. Hello, House.
Hello.
Yeah, this is Mr. Ujupita. The part 4. I'm very happy. First of all, I want to appreciate Dr. Uzoma for what they have been able to do for the paper presentation. The situation we find ourselves presently now, I want to ask ourselves, what do we do and how do we go about it to make sure that, look at just the building code that they just said. Some of these private company that is building a house or a company, before the building plan is being approved, what can we do to make sure that these issues of the bill, the disability law that has been passed, can be incorporated into their own activities in the building, before the building plan can be approved. That is just what I want to say. And also, I also want person with disability to even take part in whatever we are doing. This sensitization we are talking about, it is we ourselves that can do it. And we need to move out to let the public be aware. Even there are some people that we talk to that doesn't even know that there is something like disability law in the country. So all these areas are what I believe. I want you to help us. What do we do concerning the building plan, the building code? How do we go about it to make sure that before any building plan is being approved, that they are aware and let them realize that if there is need for them to put strong ramp, let them include ramp into their building plan before the plan can be approved. Thank you.
Thank you for that very interesting intervention. Do we have Dr. Barakat Raji to?
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Please, you have
I must say I'm overwhelmed because this is happening in my faculty and particularly in the Department of International and Jurisprudence and International Law. And you know, as a lecturer of the Nigerian legal system, I just want to hear my observation that in order to balance the equation rather, we need to invite the Muslim clergy too to come and say, because as we all know that Nigerian legal system is tripartite in nature. So we cannot leave them in anything that concerns the right of the citizens, especially the PWDs people, because as we have PW people among the Christians, also we have in the Muslim part. So I just want to urge that we should avert our mind to it. when we are having this kind of program. Thank you very much.
I'm sure.
Hello, hope you hear me.
Yes, we heard you. Thank you for that intervention. Thank you, Funsho. I'm sure you've taken note of this in the event that we are going to have a next edition. So, Dr. Ngozi and Dr. Ozo, I'll give you the floor again for a minute each to respond to some of the questions and observations that have been made. And after that, I will give every other person that wants to make a statement the floor. Before we close, we seek to close in about 7 minutes tops. Thank you. Dr. Ome, please. You have to unmute yourself, Dr. Ome.
I always forget to do this. Okay. My response to the issue of buildings and accessibility would be that we start from our communities. It still takes us back to awareness raising. We need to, both as individuals, as organizations, try to enlighten people as much as possible in our discussions. And then we need to make issues of disability part of our schools curriculum. That's a very important way to raise awareness as early as possible for the next generation. We also need to do this in our various churches and mosques. We can also, just like my colleague Dr. also said, we could use the model of immunization because these people enter every nook and cranny of the community. But we cannot leave it for the government alone. We as advocates must join hands. Civil society organizations have a lot of work to do. Then we also have to engage professionals and professional bodies like the architects and the rest of them to make them understand the need to provide ramps and lifts where possible so that persons with disabilities can access courts and access buildings and transport. And I think the goal at all times must be to create equal opportunity by taking measures that would help to integrate people who have habitually been discriminated against. With respect to buildings, we must have a way of getting to professional bodies like the architects. We meet them to make sure they understand. If possible, we could create jingles using the media. The Facebook is there, WhatsApp is there. We also have media people and media personnel among us. I think they can go a long way to help. Our churches can help. The mosque can help. By the time we break the ceiling, then they will know that we are serious.
Thank you. Yeah, Dr. Ozo, please, your final shots.
Thank you so much to the persons who listened enough to ask questions. Mr. Bacha from Ijebode, you asked why didn't the federal and the state assemblies veto those lack of accent from either the state governors or the federal or the president. My thoughts on that would be maybe party loyalty. When the president is from your party and he's not assenting to a bill and that house is controlled by that party, more often than not, that law will not go through because it's been agreed upon in another fora that the law shouldn't move forward. Or our representatives are not so keen to veto. I don't know that we've had a lot of that in Nigeria. We've had so many laws that remained in the pipeline. You know, as they say in Nigeria, something is in the pipeline. We've had so many laws like that. I don't think it's in our legal tradition as the legislature to veto laws that the president have chosen not to assent to. I mean, those are my thoughts. I'm not sure why they are not taking that option as provided by the law. And then you also asked, how do we implement the Disability Act? I guess that's why we're here. We've talked about public interest litigation. We've talked about testing the limits. People, standing up for these rights, raising up your hands that no, there should be an interpreter here. There should be, sign language. There should be insignia showing where, someone who is disabled should sit. People who are disabled should go forward first. The elderly should get served first. If you're in front and you have someone disabled behind you, remind the organizers that there's someone disabled behind me. Can the person go before me? Let's take responsibility. Move. The law has been passed. That more often than not, that's what the government will do. They pass the law, and it's up to you. Unless we have like there's a speaker that spoke about a minister or commissioner who is passionate about freedom. Unless you have a person in authority like that who is personally interested in a particular issue, then they pick up a law and they want to, because I realized that around the country, I see signs of muster point. And I said, it's a particular government official who took it upon themselves to implement that law. It's not a new law that we should have a place where we should gather when there is a fire drill in a building. But I suddenly see that there are so many signs all over the country that says muster point, where people should gather when there's fire. Someone made sure that law was implemented. Lagos State before didn't have street signs. Fashola made sure. So if unless we have someone like that in governance who is interested in a particular piece of legislation, it remains a black letter law. And it's now left to us to push, to make effort through our personal spaces of influence to bring the law to bear in as much as we can until government decides to implement these laws. And then for Mr. Ojo, the CEO of UNI Foundation, you asked them, what do we do about building plans and approvals for building plans? I don't think we will know about approvals because, first of all, because people apply for approvals and they approve. If we're not a party to that transaction, we may not know. We may be more often than not limited to questioning it after we've seen the building that is not, because it's still the regulators who are their approvers. The state is the regulator who will approve buildings that comply with the provisions in the Act. So we may not always be, privy to the arrangement of the application for approval and the consequent approval. We may not always be privy to that. But of course, we can see when the building comes up that it doesn't have a ramp. And thank God that ramps, there are things that can be added after buildings have been, erected. But unlike lifts may take a lot to put into a building that is already in existence. So we just have to, like my colleague said, Dr. Ngozi, that we need to advocate a little more, push, talk about it in your school, in your church. Bring the fact of disability. We should make it a little bit more visible in our conversations, everyday conversations. That way, people know enough to include that in their plans. That way, we don't have to waste time and effort challenging buildings that were built that are not compliant. I hope that we've been able to answer your question.
Thank you, Dr. Ozo. So once again, we appreciate people here. I will be handing over shortly to Mr. Fisher for vote of thanks. And after the vote of thanks, we encourage you. We are going to have some Zoom time after, just to share some charts for about 5 minutes before we close the meeting. But you will see on your shared screen something that is happening, something that is in the air. It's going to be the first ever National Disability Rights Moot Court competition, which will hold at the University of Ilorin from November 29 to December 3, 2020. So if you know any law students, you know any law teacher, please contact us. You can contact DLAP or you contact DINABI and ask them for more information regarding this. And we're happy to have us engage more critically with these issues. Mr. Funsho, please.
Dr. Azo, before you continue, we didn't see that flyer. I didn't see any flyer. Was it a link you sent or?
I was sharing. Okay, let me share it again.
Yeah, what we saw was your folders and I don't know, your hard drive or something.
Can you see it now?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yes. So that is it. So if you know any law student, you know any law teacher, or you even want to be part of it, it's going to be the first ever disability moot competition. We want you to engage with us. Contact DINABI or contact DLAP for further information. Mr. Funsho, you have the floor, please.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Zubike. I think it's a pleasure having you around. And then let me appreciate our dear father, Professor Wahab, and then Professor Mukhtar Itudaye, as well as our daddy in absentia, Dr. J. Olatoke-san. We appreciate you. Let me also appreciate our resource persons, Dr. Uzoma and Dr. Ngozi. We appreciate you so much and thank you for the work that you are doing for the disability communities in Nigeria. Let me also appreciate all our leaders in the disability community in Nigeria. I can see a whole lot of you, having participated.
I don't know, is Funsho freezing?
Unfortunately, sorry.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay. So unfortunately, we couldn't have the essay to the governor on civil society matters and SSA to the governor on the SDGs in Ekiti State because they were having an emergency meeting with the governor today, and that was why they couldn't meet up with this program today. So let me appreciate all of us, most especially my own Junior Build chairman here in Ekiti State. I can see him, Mr. Olabi Kayode, and a lot of them. Thank you so much. A special appreciation to DLAP, Disability Law Advocacy Project, and all the entire staff of the Department of Jurisprudence and International Law, University of Ilorin. We appreciate you so much. Thank you so much. God bless you. And thank you to all our participants that you have taken your time to join us today. We want to believe that at the end of this event, we will have a better community of persons with disabilities all over Nigeria, and that we will be able to take up the initiative, that we will be able to take proactive steps into ensuring that this law is not just a paperwork that will be, swept under the carpet, but it will be an engagement tool that all of us will begin to use henceforth so as to be able to engage the government, to engage our various communities and wherever we find ourselves. Once again, on behalf of DLAP, and most especially OSIWA, who is the major funder of DLAP, we appreciate you. And on behalf of DINABI and the entire DINABI team, and on behalf of DLAP, we want to appreciate you all. Thank you so much. We hope to reach out to you soon. And then thank you also, Dr. Azubike, for moderating this session. God bless you. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank